Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each episode gives you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedicte, and I'm feeling not so autumn.
And I'm Benedikt. Today is November 12th. This is episode number 212, and I'm feeling a little bit anxious.
You're feeling lack of sun. Did you buy a sun lamp?
Yeah, we have a sun lamp. I set it up earlier today. Because my wife and I were both as last night or this morning, I think last night, it was we can tell something's been off the last couple of weeks. We need to start working on this. Because it's not miserable weather, but it's overcast. It's been overcast for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And and with everything else going on in the world,
we are Europeans talking about the weather. That's what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I just broke you off there. Let's skip the world and talk about what we're doing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? So work-wise, last week has been super productive because my usual go-to when I'm upset with the world, I just go and work because it's the easiest way to take my mind off of things. So the last couple of weeks have been productive, and we made some good progress on company triggers. I'm not sure what state it was in the last time we recorded, but the backend is basically working. We had some front-end stuff done and realized that there's a little bit of a mismatch there in terms of how things work together, and we figured out a way to streamline everything. And for the longest time, I was okay, look into this on the back end, and it looked like a big refactor and some fundamental changes. But last week, I realized that in order to prototype this, we don't have to make those changes just yet. We can just hack it. And that's what I did. Yeah, that's famous last words. But still, as long as this is in development and not shipped, and we're still figuring out what to do, I think it's totally fine. And honestly, the hack isn't too bad, so I'm probably comfortable with shipping it like this as well. But long story short, figured out that we can test this, do this with the new format without having to reinvent everything. So that's what we rolled out on. No, not rolled out, but implemented on the back end. And this week we are focusing on getting the front end to match that. And I think then it's in a good shape to at least roll out behind the feature flag. So I'm looking forward to that. What we also did, what was a lot of fun, was we removed a bunch of dependencies from the backend application. Just did a little bit of a review of libraries we're using or barely using.
Yeah.
And then just trying to just remove them. And I think we were able to remove 3 or 4. And that allowed us to basically upgrade to Rails 8 already, which was released last week.
So some of these dependencies were not on Rails 8, so that would have been a pain.
Yeah, one of them was a blocker, so removing that. And yeah, it was overdue. I've been thinking about doing this for quite a while, and it's it's just sit down and do the work, and it turned out to be pretty simple. I think it was a 30 minute of work. And the other stuff was just the JSON. There's a JSON gem, which is basically for reading JSON and serializing objects into JSON. And it apparently used to be maintained by someone outside of the Ruby core team or something like that. And just recently, the Ruby core team got access to it and was able to take it over. And there's one guy who's just has been working on this for the past 3 weeks and improved it by improved performance by 20x or something like that.
Ooh.
So it's pretty impressive, and that allowed us to just removed we had an alternative JSON implementation in there basically for performance reasons. And now that the official thing is as fast as the optimized thing, we just removed it and just used the official one now. So that's kind of exciting. But yeah, all of
It's
that
going to be
combined.
interesting. Sorry, it's going to be interesting to see how all these open source communities and frameworks are going to govern, because I think we're getting to a point where it's all the politics around it, but also where kind of maintainers are closing in on end of life,
Yep.
because a lot of these things started, I guess 20 years ago, some even
Yep.
30, if you look at some of the more low level stuff. But even WordPress is, I used that when I was in university, and it wasn't, I guess it was fairly new. And that's, become quite a while since I was in university. So yeah, just thinking with my experience with my mom, who got Alzheimer when she was in her 50s, I'm thinking how do we make sure that a lot of these libraries that are the keys are held by somebody who might,
yeah,
die or get Alzheimer, or get illnesses that make it so that this is not, obviously not their priority, and not even their priority to figure out how to exchange the keys, because
yeah,
that,
for
there
sure.
needs to be a plan, who's going to get these keys and who are going to, take this over. So I think we're we're moving into a time in open source, in addition to the politics, where it's just life is going to happen to a lot of these libraries and dependencies.
Yeah, and at this point, this is a real concern when you look at stuff and they're okay, should I adopt this and use this library or not? And I'm always calling, or it's not my term, but it's the thing of the bus factor, right? What happens if the person gets hit by a bus, or one of the people on the team gets hit by a bus? What happens? And I always try to minimize the risk of just someone dropping out or just disappearing, basically by just picking projects that are well maintained and have a community and stuff like that. But it's not always possible. And did we talk about this? I'm not sure, but one of the reasons why I'm a little bit concerned about Ember.js and the Ember.js community is for example, the data library we're using. Right now, it's basically 1.5 guys or something like that that are actively maintaining this and have all the knowledge, and that is a problem. It's not that I don't trust them to not do good work or something like that, but what if they break a leg and get lost in the woods or whatever? That person is gone. All their ideas and mental framework of what they were doing is gone. And I'm worried about that.
Yeah, and it is it's always a factor, right? But it's the risk is a little lower in the both in the beginning in terms of how large things are, but also in the beginning because
Right.
they're often younger, and
Right.
statistically there's less chance. It could always happen, but it is less chance. But when people are approaching their mid 40s, statistically things can happen, and things can happen to their family even, that makes it so that they don't have time, or even any wants, or just not any time or any capacity to make sure that things are handed over or maintained. So it is interesting. That little meme with the little brick that it's holding up.
Yep.
Whole project is getting more and more real. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's been real the entire time, but I guess as you said, now you actually see some of those things collapsing because people disappear and stuff like that. Yeah. Interesting
Back to happier,
times, but
interesting times.
but again, we removed a couple of those dependencies, so less dependent on a couple of things to break down, I guess. So that is nice. We upgraded to Rails 8, at least on the branch. There's one dependency still blocking to roll this out, but it's literally they just need to relax their version requirements on the dependency. And I think there's movement there, so I'm expecting this to happen this week. So, yeah, looking forward to upgrade to Rails 8, which is exciting.
Some good chore tasks there. Chore tasks has been done.
It's a chore task, but it's always the jump from 7.2 to 8 isn't that big in terms of features and changes, so it's an easy one, but it's kind of nice to just stay up to date because you get all the nice new stuff, right?
I feel like fall is the right season, if you're in the northern hemisphere,
to do this, you mean?
To do chore tasks, to clean up a little. It's like, I don't know, I feel like fall has that vibe where it's take a chill and do some, where it's not maybe
clean up.
Well, it's not hard. It's not hard mental work, but it's it just needs to be done. And you have more, at least I feel like I have more time to sit on the computer. You don't want to go out as much. You can spend a night cleaning some dependencies, or maybe not nights. We shouldn't work nights, but sometimes. But it feels like, at least I feel like, I want to just snuggle up at home. And since coding is both hobby and work, it's one of those things you can just do, especially those tasks that don't require as much mental energy. You can just do it.
I don't know. For me, I feel like autumn and winter is for whatever reason the time where I feel most productive. I'm especially after summer, especially when it's hot, I can see my productivity just declining to nothing because I'm just sitting there and sweating. I can't think straight. And once it gets cooler, in autumn, I feel that drive comes back, and
so you get the extra drive. That's spring for me, early spring, I guess. And also winter, just because of the time and you not wanting to do a million other things. But I know for me, fall is cleaning up, organizing, and then work. And then winter comes, you have the time, and then spring energy is back, but you just want to run outside and look at nature, I guess, or just be outside with people.
Exactly. Spring,
I get a lot more social. I get a lot more social in May. I just want to be with people. Well, during the winter, I'm I don't need folks. I'll just sit here. And then I had to remind myself that I still need people. Because I still need to hang out with people. But yeah. Anyway, I think Christmas season for us parents is just crazy. From mid-December, we don't get anything done because it's Christmas plays. It's Christmas this, Christmas that, and it's all these things that need to happen. That I guess you can say no to some of it, but when you have if I worked as a nurse, I would say no because I was going to work that night and I wouldn't go and see the play. But when you don't, you feel you can't be no, mommy's going to sit at home on her computer instead of watching the school play. It doesn't compute. So you end up going to all of them. And it takes quite a lot of time, actually. But yeah, that was we digress.
The only other thing we did in the past week or the past 2 weeks is we built some tooling to debug our workflows. And that was mostly inspired because we had some weird issues that we couldn't quite figure out. And now that prompted me spending some time on building inspector tools so we can now visualize the entire workflow tree, the abstract syntax tree, on the command line and get a nice overview of what state everything is in. And we even built it's kind of like a player where you can watch the execution of one workflow for one user and see what steps they move through. And it was fun to build, and it was also useful because we actually figured out we figured out at least one issue that has been dazzling us for the past months. And I still don't understand why it happened exactly, but I think we have a fix, and hopefully things are more stable there now. So it was a fun exercise, and building command line tools is kind of fun. I kind of enjoy it.
I was testing Bento, as I mentioned last week, which is a competitor of both Userlist and Outsera. But we needed that SMS feature. And there you can actually, like, he has an event stream, and you can do the event ID, and you can send it into your workflow. And then it actually visualizes in the workflow the paths that it would have taken if that event had come in.
Interesting.
So it's kind of the same, but it's just in the visual builder. You can like trigger an event, and then you can see what is happening and like what path it would take through your tree.
Is it simulating, or is it actually doing anything?
No, so that's simulated. It's not doing anything, and it didn't show that much of the kind of outputs. Like, what would the outputs be? Like, I feature requested that because it would be great to see like what is the actual output of each node with that event without it actually happening in reality.
Right.
But just seeing what path it takes like was super helpful. And I caught a bug where it's like, why is it going to both? And then I was like, oh, because my logic was off. So that was kind of, I thought that was cool. I haven't seen that in other tools.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things on my big vision to-do list. Like, have a proper debugger for all of this stuff, like in the UI. But I guess my vision is too grand and too big, so I don't know how to do it right now, and I think it will take a lot of work. So it's kind of on the back burner these days, but that would actually be cool, yeah.
And I think it's a little. I feel like he's very like focused on the kind of indie hacker developer type. I mean, the whole interface feels more geared towards me than a marketer, like where the marketer is an engineer, kind of. And then it makes sense. But I don't think a marketer would perhaps think in those, like think to ask for something like that, or think to look for something like that. Yep. Or so I feel like it makes sense kind of for his product and his like user group, because we want those things. But it's a hard thing to build, and if your users aren't going to use it because they're not that type of user, then but I think he said he built it for himself in support to like help see what people run an event simulated, like you're kind of doing with your command line now. So you could still do that help for them.
Yeah, the command line tool is more like a replay tool, so you can like just like replay what happened, rather than simulating what would happen. But it's so, like, I guess it's like trying to solve the same purpose, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool.
So what have you been up to?
Are you hearing all of the chewing, or is the background noise removal working?
I can still hear it, but it's not too bad. I think it's better than previously.
Yeah, listener, I'm so sorry, but we have two rodents that live in our house. We're by choice. We have them living in our house. And they managed to eat through their wheel. They have like a wooden wheel that they're supposed to run in, and they've been eating at it, and it makes that noise. So, and I can't like close it off for them, so I don't know what to do. Before, you could just hear some like swishing if they were like running in it. You could hear like a faint sound, but I don't know. These wheels are just the loudest thing they chew on, because they've always chewed on stuff, but I don't know what it is with this wheel. It's like this like plywood that kind of like the whole thing vibrates. So I guess that's why it's so much noise. So bear with me. At some point I'll build walls in my houses. I don't have any. We don't do well with walls here in our on our property. Anyway, so what have I been up to? So for the bike rental company that I'm the fractional CTO of, we have been accepted into the Telia startup program. So Telia is like the big telecom company. In Norway, we have two. This is like the second largest. And we went to this like, introduction and everybody, and there were some like talks and stuff like that. And I noticed some things like one, like I've been through similar things where it's like, you're like, yes, like a lot of the things are like known. And you can see that there were some startups with dudes who were like 22, like, well, maybe they were 22, but to me, they looked 22.
Yeah.
They were like on the edge of their seat, like, just taking everything in. And then there were some of us who were, past 40, who were more like sitting back and eating the free candy. And I also realized that I'm too old for like fun and modular startup furniture. We talked a little bit pre-recording that it's good to like sit on or like sleep on bad beds or like do things like that to make sure that not everything has to be comfortable. But I draw the line on like sitting on a wooden box, basically just a wooden box with nothing to lean on for like 3 hours. Like my body was screaming murder by the end of the day. So I like walked behind this, like I was walking back and forth in the back of the venue. But even though I don't know what do we call it when you're like old and you feel like you know everything. But I do think it's gonna be a good program for us. Like these were the introduction days. And on the second day we got introductions to like 4G and 5G networks in Norway and also how they work in general. And that was super interesting because we are looking to equip our bikes with a little IoT device that can measure temperature and maybe moisture and also kilometers ridden. So we have that in the end, like the little like computer on the bike. It says how many kilometers it's been going, but we need the bike to come in for that. And what we want is, I probably mentioned it before, we want to do predictive maintenance so we can see if a bike has been ridden for a lot of kilometers, but also more interestingly is if they've been going up and down in like altitude, because there's a big difference in the like how the brakes are doing if the person is riding downhill every morning or every afternoon than if they're just doing the same length like on a flat surface. And then it's moisture and temperature, because that has like a lot of impact on the equipment. Like if it's
Right.
going from cold to warm, like if it's being stored inside or outside and that sort of thing. So in this program, we also have like access to some of Telia's like products where we can test out we have to organize, because everything has to have a little SIM card, and like how you organize the SIM cards, what happens to a SIM card if somebody takes it out of the device. And they said like they have these systems that you can use where you can configure it so that if somebody removes a SIM card from a device, then the SIM card stops working, or it's allowed to change into another device. And like there were things that you can do so that like somebody doesn't steal your SIM cards, I guess, and just like use them for something else. And then we also got a introduction to the 3G, 4G, 5G network and the specters of frequencies and all those kinds of things. And as now a proud Norwegian, the first 4G network was deployed in Norway. So we used to be like cutting edge. And at this point, Telia said they had a 5G coverage of, I think it was 96% of the country, or like people in Norway has access to 5G networks, which is kind of cool. It kind of opens up a lot of possibilities. So that part I really liked. The whole like find your like what are you, what like category is your product, and what like all of those things that would like. I don't know. But I also think that it's good to, we have the saying in Norwegian, put a foot on the ground, which makes, I think the American or English version is like take stock. So there has been some changes in the leadership of the company. And I think like using this program is a good way for us to kind of take stock of where we are and, what has happened kind of just because, and what was the initial vision, and where was that the correct thing, like where was that change a correct thing to do, and where did it kind of just happen without intention. And having, so we also get mentors, and like having to explain ourselves to mentors, helps with kind of actually verbalizing and thinking through these things. So we're going to have
Yeah.
some sessions where we take stock, or put a foot in the ground. Put a foot on the ground, I guess is the Norwegian term. What is the German term? Like if you translate it, is it?
I don't
Or you
know.
never do this?
I there probably is one. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess we have words for everything, but
Maybe you have a word for it, not a saying. Like you have like
maybe
the
yeah. I
specific
don't. Yeah,
word for. Um,
I can't
yeah,
think of anything right now.
you
But
can't
also,
think of
my
it.
mind is currently in English mode. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. See, that is hard sometimes, and I notice now because two of the co-founders of We, or the co-founders, are Norwegian, and then I work with a guy called Luis. So we speak English. He's the operation manager. But a lot of kind of this work and the Telia and all of the presentations by Telia was in Norwegian, which is super weird for me. I'm used to like all of the tech stuff being in English. So I noticed now
Mhm.
when I was trying to like talk about it, I had a harder time talking about it because it was all presented in Norwegian, and we've been talking about these things in Norwegian. So my mind kind of was a little off with what language we were using. But anyway, and back to we, looking at the tech strategy going forward, like it's clear that we need to get off Airtable to get some data integrity and a little bit of a better API. We're getting like rate limited and like weird errors from
Mm.
Airtable at different times. I mean, there will always be errors in the internet, but it feels like things like it's not supposed to like run a larger system, and we're not large yet, so things should be running fairly smoothly. And through my work with Outseta, I've come across or like been introduced to something called Xano, which is a no code backend, or now they call it visual coding. And it's, you can create a full background. It's on top of a Postgres database, and you do all your endpoints with kind of modules that you click together, and that kind of thing. And I used it the first time. I was like, I hated it. I had to use it to update some things for our Outseta integration. And I started realizing like this is fast. Like now that I just knew a couple of things, like spinning up an endpoint was just like click, 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 and you're like, you're done. So I'm getting more and more like into this kind of like lower code space where I'm like, there are some really uh, benefits to this. And then through my talk with the DevRel at Outseta, I was like, if you're ever in Norway, come visit me. I said jokingly because nobody, he's in Australia. Like you don't usually do meetups in Norway, if
Right.
you're not like super big. And he was like, yeah, we'll probably come because our largest customer is Norwegian. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? And then it turns out that this like huge like property manager in Norway, property management company in Norway is using Xano. And I was like, can you get me an introduction? And we met up, and he he was sold. Like he loved, well, he was, he said there are things like where you're just like, I want to do this in code. But he said, I don't remember the numbers exactly. I need to get back to him. But they had like lots of people on the team. Like they had a full team in, I think, Poland. They had some back end people here and there. And I think they at least cut their head count by like half. And their speed has been just like going through the roof. And I think they use Xano for the back end, and then like a little bit of different things for the front end, but some no code tools
Mhm.
there as well. Um, and I was like, okay. And they're at this point, because a lot of times when you talk to these companies, it's like they've used it for like a little side project. So their logo on the side might be, some like major company like Disney, and then Disney used
Right.
it for their campaign site that sent out their Christmas codes or whatever for some kind of Christmas campaign. And he'd felt the same. But their company, like they're doing this thing they've deployed now, 30,000 properties or like apartments. Um, that they're like running on this. So it's not, it's not like a fun little side project. It's like a major
It's an
thing.
actual thing, right?
It's an actual thing. So I'm like leaning more and more towards maybe going for Xano. And one of the things that he said, which is cool, is that since it is Postgres as their foundation, like if they go bust, you can at least get your data out in a way that makes sense. And then you'll have to rebuild all of these functions or like these endpoints, obviously. But at least your data isn't in some like weird proprietary thing that is hard to kind of get connected to. So yeah, that was a long talk about maybe say no. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna play some more with it.
It's just like add one more tool to the mix of multiple tools that are already in play, right?
Well, this thing will remove make. So all the automations would probably go through Xano instead of using something like make. So I can just make I can make actions, I think they're called, or whatever, in Xano that has like access directly to the Postgres database. And then all of the backend and then all of the database. So that would be Airtable and make. And then we can connect our current front end to Xano. So yeah, instead of building out backend with Rails or Laravel or something like that. Yeah. So I think like more and more, I've said it before, I think more and more like the data, because you don't get around the data modeling. Like you can make a crap backend in Xano if your data model sucks. And that's the same thing with Airtable, right? It could have been better if the data model was better. So I'm feeling like a lot more with like, I don't know, AI and no-code tools and all of this. It's like you need to get those pieces like really good. And then it doesn't really matter what tool you're using. And it's a little different for userless because you're creating a tool and it's got some very hard requirements. But like our bikes, like we just need users and we need workshop tickets and we need to know what bikes we have. It's not it's not like a unique thing where we absolutely must code parts of it. I think we'd be able to make whatever we need with a tool like this. But he said it's really hard to find people because coders want to code.
No surprise.
So you need to find people who are more like systems people or who are like more concerned about like making the thing than actually coding the thing. And I think like we've seen that shift in like house building, right? Where before you had to like actually build a house. Now it's more about finding the correct modules to build a house.
Right.
And if you really like standing building house, like you're not going to be wanting to build houses anymore with this new method. So it's going to be a shift in what kind of people are needed and what kind of people are going to enjoy it. And I think a lot of developers will enjoy doing things like this because it's more about what are we making kind of people. But the people who just kind of love taking a ticket and like code, like the craft of coding and writing code, yeah, they're not going to enjoy building things with something like Xano. So
yeah, but I think it's also a little bit of what you're used to, right? I feel like if someone just gets into this, they're like less opinionated of like of what they want to do and how they want to do it. I feel like the older you get, the more. And I'm like this, right? I mean, I know how to code. Like for me, it's probably slower to learn a new thing. Oh, maybe not. Don't want to go that far, but like just so used to it that it's like no effort at this point, or not a lot of effort, I guess.
Yeah, but also think about like all of the, or often when you kind of find solutions to the things, even in your business, it's more about the concept and less about like how did you write the code. Kind of,
sure.
It's like, what do we want this to be event based? Do we want this to be, this or that? Like, how are we modeling? Like, what? It's much more about that. And if you enjoy that part, and you could just like click.
Yep.
But the way I come back to this research that I read in university, where people who use the command line a lot and not their mouse think they are faster, but when you measure them, they are not faster. because you engage more of your head when you're doing it. So you feel more in flow. You feel like it was a faster thing to do, to use your little shortcuts and commands and whatever. But often moving the mouse is faster to get the job done. But the perception is that it was faster. And I feel like we're going to see that kind of disconnect with tools like Xano, because I feel when I get frustrated in there because I can't do it exactly like I'm used to. I can't just do it the way I want to. I have to learn new things. I have to click around, and it feels slower. But if I actually time it, it was the same thing with Make. I set up a webhook for Stripe in Make. I've done that a million times in code. And I have to admit, it was faster. I didn't have to fire up the code editor. I didn't have to get my environment straight. Didn't have to decide, if this is a new project or, if it's a part of this mono repo. I could just go ahead and click. But it didn't feel fun. It didn't feel fast, because things were loading and spinners were loading, waiting for the data comes through. But I'm pretty sure it was faster, because it took me about an hour. I've never built a webhook in an hour and deployed it. Some people might be faster than me, but yeah. So that disconnect, I think, is going to be weird for a lot of people. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else you've been working on?
I don't know where that put us. I don't know either, yeah. I've been working on. I just came up with a namespace for our outside Xano setup. So we need to make that easier. And one of the things that needs to happen is that we need to trade the Outseta access token for a Xano access token, so that people can log in with Outseta, but then access the data in Xano with the Xano access token. So I'm working on a little script, and this is back to our no code land, where you just put scripts into the header or to the head element of your site, and then you just kind of fire off code. They just copy paste snippets. So we just need to have a documented, but I want most of the code to be in the snippet that I host. Yeah, and so I did this with AI. I was chat GTPing. We were having fun. It generated all of the code for me. But then I realized that I could do the namespace XO. And that made my day, because I needed an XO. You know, Gossip Girl XOXO? No, you don't. Well,
sorry,
it made my day.
I did not get that. No,
you did not get that. No, so XO means hugs and kisses. It's a thing you do in American teen culture.
Yeah, okay, I know that.
Your XO, yeah. So that made my day, where I could do XO instead of OX, which would be ox, which is also a word, but not as it didn't tickle. Wasn't as fun for me. So I created a new global headspace then, the headspace namespace. So we have Outseta, and then it's Xano, and then it's XO for the little utility functions I'm making to integrate the two.
Got it. Now it makes sense.
I'm going to make a little XO logo, handwritten. No, just kidding. But again, I don't know. I am getting, me and AI, we're befriending each other more and more. Where it was just a lot. I said, what do I want? It did something wrong. I wrote it again. Again, it's a little boring, because you're not coding. But it generated, and we could talk about, I don't want to personify the AI, but I could be this is not a good name for this thing, or I could make it better for the things that are kind of important for a utility code like this. It's important that the person using it's clear naming, good structure. So I could focus more on that than actually getting the letters down on paper or down in the code editor. So I'm opening. It's I'm not as negative as I was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for some stuff it's actually useful. Yeah, earlier today I was building adding some tests for stuff, and I keep coming back to this example, but it was super useful just to have Copilot just autocomplete the test cases. Because I had to write basically the same test for three different things that behave slightly different. But once I had written one, Copilot was smart enough to figure out the test cases for everything else. So it was a big speed up, I have to admit. Yeah.
And then I think something it's going to be super good at, which makes sense, and we should have had much better tooling for this long ago, I think, is migrating or converting things.
Yeah.
I saw somebody in the Mega Maker community saying that they used, what was that called? It was like a command line tool that talks to AI, and you can also add like a knowledge MD to your project that is like additional knowledge that you want the tool to use. And they wanted to add dark mode, which is like, I don't like dark mode. Anyway, they needed to add dark mode, and they were like, it's going to take time because you have to go through a lot of places and make sure that you have, you've set yourself up for success for dark mode and light mode, and, everywhere.
Right.
And they used this tool, and I think it said like he spent 2 or 3 hours getting like, I don't know, working with the tool, and then like 2 or 3 hours to like fix some edge cases, and he was kind of done in a day. And this was something they had estimated would take a lot more time. So I think that maybe I still don't believe in the you can just clone anything with AI and it's going to work good. I think it's going to work until something breaks and you have no idea how you're going to get out of this broken down SaaS that you're selling people. But I think for extending or like migrating between two languages, or as you said, like I need to do this, but 10 times more, like slightly different, then it's gonna be super helpful. But you still, like, even with the little script that I made with ChatGPT, like if I hadn't known how to code it, there were so many like little errors and edge cases that it doesn't account for. But it's just like a fast way to get, rubber ducking and just like getting the thing up, and then I can go in and fix the things that I need fixing. So I would never like trust it to like build me a SaaS, which I see people on Twitter are saying is possible now.
Yeah, I see that a lot as well, but I have not seen an example where I was like, yeah, okay, cool. That is actually like that. I always see like stuff like, I made this calculator or something like that, which is like, yeah, okay, fine. But like, I haven't seen anything where I was like, yeah, okay, this is something you could charge money for. So,
and as we talked about many times, it's often not just a code. Like maybe it will get there, but it also, you as the person behind it need to do a lot of work in addition, because it's the code itself is not userless, or the code itself is not outside it's the business model. Yes. It's like how we chose to solve the problem. There's so many things in addition to just the code. So yes, and it's the same thing with the starter, the boilerplates, right? It gives you a kickstart on the technical side, but you're still going to run into the same issues that people who have coded it themselves, and then you have less knowledge about the thing when you're running into the issue. So, but I do think we're going to see a speed up, like this guy that I was talking to, who are using no code or low code or whatever you want to call it, tools, seeing like they could respond to the needs from the business a lot faster. And he was like sometimes a little too fast.
You mean like in the sense of where it's not fully thought through yet, but also already in production? Yeah, that's
because when you have to code, when you have to type it out, you have that time where you're like, well, should we make this? It's and that reminds
me
of
all the ways this could break or screw things up.
Yeah, and like, did they need it? Is this actually the best path forward? And I think that's like interesting with speed, because I remember back to when newsletters started getting op-eds by email. They got a lot more angry op-eds because people could like sit down, they were frustrated, they would write an op-ed and like hit send on the email. While before you had to sit down, you had to write a letter, and then you had to post a letter. And from writing to posting, there is some time where you maybe
you're like, this is not that important.
Like maybe it was not that important, or maybe I didn't need to be that mad, or maybe it's none of my concern, or maybe like there's so many things that can happen from like that night until the morning where you leave the house and you're gonna, mail this letter. So they have like a lot more things coming in, but not necessarily better quality and a lot more like angry and frustrated op-eds coming in. So like, yeah, I think we need to add a little artificial time.
There was this meme, was it on XKCD as well, where like they proposed that on YouTube, before you post a comment, it would read the comment back to you. And then ask you, like, do you really want to post this?
It should read it back to you in an angry voice, and then you can be like, no, that was not how I meant it, because you never know.
That's not what I want to sound like.
That's not what I want to sound like. And maybe you said it like funnily in your head, but then somebody else reads it in an angry voice, and it changes the whole thing. But I guess that's it for today.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. This was a fun one. It went longer than I anticipated, but I think we're still well within our time constraints.
Yes. And we get to talk about AI suddenly, like a year after everybody else was talking about it.
We finally got there, you mean?
Slow and steady.
Slow and steady, yep.
Slow and steady. Okay.
Have a good 2 weeks and talk to you on the interwebs.
Yes.
Bye.